In QuickBid, indirect expenses are additional expenses associated with material and labor related to stocking, cleaning, and supervising a project, and per diem amounts you might pay to workers traveling away from home. Some estimators may choose to enter these types of expenses on the Other tab, but there is a built-in way to enter them from the Markups tab. On the left side of the Markup Details section, there are several buttons labeled Stock, Clean, Supervision, and Per Diem used to add indirect expenses. To add an indirect expense, select the section from the table at the top of the Markups tab. Then, click the button for the desired indirect expense. The Indirect Expenses window contains 4 tabs. When you click one of the indirect expense buttons, the window displays the tab related to the button you clicked. Switching tabs allows you to enter all your indirect expenses in the same session. Let's start with stocking and cleaning expenses. The Stock and Clean tabs display the same material cost codes on each, and the process for setting up stocking and cleaning expenses is the same on each tab. For stocking, you add the expense to deliver or move material around on the job site, while for cleaning, you add an expense to clean up whatever remains. Just remember, you're dealing with cost codes and not specific materials. Therefore, a single cost code may be a combination of many different types of materials. For instance, the cost code for metal framing could include light gauge metal and heavy gauge structural steel. That's an important thing to keep in mind when it comes to what you want to charge to move around or clean up this type of material. The first step is to choose how you want to calculate the expense. You can choose to calculate the expense based on the material's quantity, the total cost, or as a percentage of the labor hours assigned to the section the material is in. If you choose material quantity, you assign a cost to the value under quantity. However, remember you're potentially dealing with multiple types of items blended under a single cost code. That quantity could be a mixture of linear feet, square feet, eaches, or more. Make sure you're intimately familiar with the items used on this job and their cost codes if you choose this method. The material cost method is very straightforward. You assign a percentage to the total material cost of each cost code and use it as the expense. Labor hours is like material cost, but you instead assign a percentage to the total labor hours for each payroll class in the chosen section to use as the expense. Before adding costs, you should also choose if you want to see the result as a labor or material cost. If you choose labor, you must select the payroll class and wage type to stock or clean the job to ensure the correct labor rates and burdens are assigned. Indirect expenses added using this method appear under the labor column on the Markups tab. The labor hours method is suitable if you stock or clean the job yourself. You can also choose to show the results as a material cost. This method doesn't require any payroll information, doesn't add any extra labor burden, and the value appears under the material column. The material cost method is suitable if you hire an outside service to stock or clean your job. Let's say in this example, the supplier delivers and stocks the job and builds that price into their material charge. If so, there's no need to add a stocking expense as you'd only be double charging for the service. So you can skip to the next one if you don't need to add anything to a tab. For cleaning, imagine you generally pay a cleaning service to clean the job site for you. You don't need to calculate any labor burden because you're not performing the work yourself. So let's select material cost for both the calculation method and the result. The total cost for each cost code appears in the cost column. Now we can enter the percentage we want to charge for cleaning up this material. If the resulting amount seems too low or too high, you can change the percentage as you see fit. Once you're happy with the amount, enter a cost code for the charge. You can type it in if you know it, or look it up by clicking the magnifying glass in the cost code field. Now that the first line is complete, suppose you plan on entering roughly the same information on every other line. The Apply to All button at the bottom automatically applies the entries from the selected line to every other line. Once applied, you can change or delete any charges you don't want. The Save as Default button remembers your entries and automatically applies them to the same cost codes if present on future jobs. Remember, the Stock and Clean tabs work the same, so whatever you do on one can be done on the other. Let's move on to Supervision now. There are 3 different ways to calculate supervision charges. The first 2 ways are very similar to the Stock and Clean tabs. Enter a percentage based on the total labor cost or labor hours. Then enter the payroll class of the supervisor, the wage type, and the cost code. Let's look at the labor hours method in detail. In this example, there are several payroll classes. Let's say you want to supervise one of them about 15% of the time. That generates a certain number of supervisory hours, not a cost in the total hours field. Now, enter the payroll class and wage type those hours apply to and a cost code. Once you select the payroll class, the hourly rate and the total hours multiply. The cost appears on the Markups tab once you save and close the Indirect Expenses window. Like before, you can apply these entries to every line on the page using the Apply to All button, and then just adjust them afterwards. You can also save the entries as defaults to save time on future jobs. Now, let's look at the third method for generating supervisory costs, duration. This method sets up supervisor costs for the entire job duration, rather than by percentage. First, select which payroll class you wish to supervise. You may not supervise every installer. Once selected, QuickBid displays the total hours for all installers for the entire job duration. Based on a crew size of 1, the initial duration might look exceptionally long. Adjust the crew size to include all the workers in the selected payroll classes you have on site. The total estimated time, divided by the number of installers, equals the total duration. At the bottom, click the New button to enter the supervisor's payroll class, wage type, and cost code. The total duration multiplied by the pay rate of the supervisor payroll class equals the total supervisor wages. You can add more lines if you have more than one supervisor. The last tab is for entering per diem expenses. Per diems are charges paid to out-of-town workers for daily expenses. You may not need to use the per diem tab if this situation doesn't apply to you. To enter a per diem charge, simply enter the hourly, or more often, the daily amount paid to your out-of-town worker. Now just select a cost code. You can apply the entries to all lines and save them as default, just like on the other tabs. Finally, click the OK button to save and close the Indirect Expenses window. The total costs generated appear on the associated line under Material or Labor. Now, just move to the next section and repeat the process. Alternatively, you can apply indirect expenses to the entire bid all at once by selecting the base bid before clicking an indirect expense button. When you choose one of the buttons, you receive a message indicating that any expenses previously entered will be erased if you continue. Any entries you make from this point on, including no entries at all, override anything previously applied. For that reason, you must complete all 4 sections, stock, clean, supervision, and per diem, during a single session if you choose this method. If changes are required, you must make them from within a specific section, or else the previous entries are deleted. At the bottom of the Markups tab is a section labeled Additional Markups. Additional markups are costs associated with your bid, such as bond premiums, contingencies, or allowances for specific owner requirements. Additional markups are the only charges in a bid not tied to a division, section, or cost code. Instead, they're tracked solely under the description you give them. After entering a description, you can choose the method QuickBid uses to calculate the markup. Amount, to simply enter a flat dollar markup amount. Cost per thousand, to enter an amount charged per every $1,000 in your bid. Percent, to set a percentage based on either the gross margin or a basic straight markup. And subtotal, which doesn't create a new markup, but instead creates a new line that totals up any of the costs above it. In the rate field, you can enter the amount or percentage you wish to add to the bid. If you added a flat amount, you're all done. However, if you chose one of the other options, you must complete the remaining fields. If your bid has accepted alternates, you can select the Accepted Alternates checkbox to include the alternate total in the calculations. Next, choose the amount to which your additional markup should apply. There are many options, including the gross, subtotal, and net total for the whole bid and each cost type, labor, material, subs, equipment, and other. If you need to add more than one additional markup, click the blue plus sign to add a new line. Additional markups can be reordered or deleted by selecting a line and using the up and down arrows to move it, or the red X to remove it altogether. If you'd like an additional markup to apply to every bid from now on automatically, click the Save as Default button.